The monitor went flat while my hand was still wrapped around hers. My wife looked straight at me, used the last breath in her body, and whispered, "Don't let my father take June." Then her eyes emptied. If stories like this hit the part of you that still isn't finished believing in impossible things, subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment before we go any further. Because this one doesn't just hurt, it lingers, it waits, and when it comes back for you, it comes back with teeth. I was 31 when Mara died. At least, that was the word they used. Died. Such a neat little word for what it does to a room. 1 second there was noise. Nurses, shoes squeaking, machines chirping like mechanical birds, my own voice saying her name too many times too fast. Then the doctor looked at the clock, said, "Time of death, 8:16 p.m." And the whole universe shrank down to the sound of June crying in my sister's arms out in the hallway. June was 4 months old. Mara had collapsed in our kitchen while warming a bottle. Just folded in half like somebody had cut a string inside her. Massive brain bleed, they said. Sudden, catastrophic. The kind of word doctors use when they don't want you asking if love should have been enough to stop it. I remember stupid things from that night. A coffee stain on the doctor's cuff. The way Mara's wedding ring felt too cold when I took it off because her fingers were swelling. The fact that there was half a bottle warming in the kitchen when we got back home, and the milk had gone sour, and I stood there in the dark smelling it and thinking, there is no way the world expects me to keep breathing after this. But the world did. The funeral came 3 days later. Mara's father, Vincent Hale, stood at the front row in a black suit worth more than my car, dry-eyed and tall and perfectly composed, like grief had hired him to represent it. He hugged people, thanked people, shook hands, controlled the weather around him. He owned half the private medical buildings in our county and sat on the hospital board besides. People lowered their voices around him without knowing they were doing it. He and Mara had spent years barely speaking. When we got married at 24 in a courthouse with rainwater drying on my jacket, Vincent hadn't come. He sent flowers so expensive they looked sarcastic. Mara laughed when she saw them and said, "That's my father. If he can't control the moment, he'll decorate it." At the funeral, he waited until everyone had left. Then he found me in the church kitchen while I was rinsing paper cups because I couldn't stand still. "June should come with me for a while," he said. I thought I'd heard him wrong. "What? You haven't slept in days. You're a contractor with inconsistent income. You've never raised a child alone." "She's my daughter." He nodded once, almost kindly. "She's my daughter's daughter." I set the cup down too hard. "Mara's barely in the ground." "Mara," he said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from his sleeve, "is exactly why I'm having this conversation now." Then he left me there, dripping church coffee onto my shoes, my heart pounding so hard I actually heard her last words again. "Don't let my father take June." That sentence lived under my skin for the next 7 years. Vincent came after us exactly 12 days later. Not with fists. Men like him never use their own hands. He came with attorneys. He came with language, stability, environment, financial consistency, emotional capacity. He came with a stack of papers thick enough to look official even before you read them. He came with a private investigator's photos of me leaving the grocery store in sweatpants, of me dozing in a chair with June on my chest, of me standing in a pharmacy aisle at midnight, staring blankly at baby formula like I'd forgotten how numbers worked. In court, his lawyer used the phrase, "acute bereavement instability." I still remember it because it made me sound like weather damage. I also remember the judge asking if I'd seen a therapist. I remember my answer being honest. No. I remember Vincent tilting his head like there, finally, was the proof. The humiliating part wasn't that they questioned whether I could raise my daughter. The humiliating part was that some broken piece of me wondered if they were right. I was sleeping 2 hours a night. Sometimes June's crying made my ears ring so badly I had to set her down in the crib and walk out into the hallway and grip the wall until I trusted my own hands again. I once microwaved coffee 3 times and found it cold in the microwave that night because I kept forgetting I was a man still living in time. But I fought. I sold Mara's car, took weekend jobs, let my sister move into the spare room for 6 months, started therapy because spite is as good a beginning as faith. Showed up to every hearing, shaved, awake, and furious. And I won. Not cleanly, not triumphantly. The judge denied Vincent's petition for guardianship and gave him scheduled visitation instead. When the ruling came down, Vincent didn't look surprised. He looked patient, like a man who had simply been told to wait longer for something that already belonged to him. That expression haunted me more than if he'd shouted. The years after that were not beautiful years. I hate when people lie about grief and call it beautiful because it sounds noble. It wasn't noble. It was laundry and exhaustion and answering, "Where's Mommy?" before the child asking it fully understood what missing meant. It was June, at 2 years old, kissing Mara's photo with jam on her mouth. It was June at 4, asking if heaven had school. It was June at 6, bringing home a paper star from class that said, "My mom lives in the sky, but my dad says she still sees my drawings." It was me standing in the garage that night and crying so hard I threw up into a paint bucket because I had been strong in all the wrong places and finally ran out. There were good moments too, which almost made it worse. June had Mara's laugh, but only when she forgot to be self-conscious. She tucked one foot under her when she sat at the piano, same as Mara. She sang slightly sharp on purpose when she wanted to be annoying, because Mara used to do that while brushing her teeth and call it jazz. I told June stories constantly about how her mother hated raisins in cookies and called them betrayal grapes. About how she cried at the end of every dog movie, even happy ones, just in case. About how she wore mismatched socks whenever she had something important to do because she believed symmetry was arrogant. Those stories became our third person in the room. Not a ghost, something warmer than that. Something like a door we kept open. Then, 7 years after the hospital, June walked onto a stage in a pale blue recital dress, and the dead came back smiling. It was a Saturday afternoon in May. The Crestwood Arts Foundation was hosting a county youth concert downtown, the kind where rich people clap too lightly and call children promising. June had won a scholarship for piano. She was nervous enough to chew the skin off her thumbnail and proud enough to pretend she wasn't. "Dad," she said in the car, "if I mess up, don't make the face." "What face?" "The supportive face that looks like you're trying not to call an ambulance." "I do not have that face." She stared at me. Mara used to do the same stare. I sighed. "Fine, I'll make my cool, mysterious face." "You don't have one of those either." That made me laugh, which was useful because the truth was, I hated events like this. Too many polished floors, too many families that arrived complete. The lobby smelled like roses and money. Parents moved around in bright little anxious clusters, adjusting collars, smoothing hair, checking programs. June went backstage with the other kids. I found a seat in the middle row and texted my sister a photo of the stage. Then the house lights dimmed. Then a woman in a dark green dress slipped into the row ahead of me, turned slightly to say something to the older man beside her, and I forgot how air worked. It was Mara. Not similar to Mara, not someone with her smile, not my grief playing tricks in low light. Mara. Same crescent scar near the chin from when she fell off a bike at 12. Same left eyebrow that lifted a fraction higher than the right when she was amused. Same hand moving to tuck hair behind her ear, except her hair was shorter now, cut to the jaw, a little darker. She looked older, obviously. So did I. Time had put its fingers on both of us. But it was her. My first stupid thought was, she hates green. Why is she wearing green? My second thought was worse. The older man beside her was Vincent. I stood up so fast my program slid to the floor. She turned at the sound. Her eyes landed on me. For one impossible second, I waited for the whole room to explode. For her mouth to open. For some buried instinct to pull her to her feet. Instead, she smiled at me the way you smile at a stranger who almost tripped in public. Polite, brief, warm. Nothing. Then she turned back toward the stage. I sat down because my knees had become decorative. There are moments when your life splits so violently you can feel the seam. That was one. I did not hear a single note of June's performance. I watched Mara's profile under stage light. I watched her laugh once at something Vincent murmured. I watched her applaud. I watched the pulse in her throat. I kept waiting for the room to correct itself. It never did. When the show ended, I shoved past 2 parents and an usher and followed them into the lobby. Mara! My voice came out cracked, too loud. She stopped. Vincent turned first, and the color drained from his face so fast I almost missed it. Almost. The woman beside him looked at me with polite confusion. "I'm sorry?" she said. That voice. Not memory, not resemblance. Her voice. "Mara," I said again, moving closer. "It's me." Vincent stepped between us. "Caleb." He said my name low, warning in it, like we were men discussing a leak in a roof instead of my wife being alive. She looked from him to me. "Do you know him?" That question cut deeper than the funeral. I said, "June's here, our daughter. You have a daughter." She blinked once, and for the first time I saw something disturb the smooth surface of her expression. Not recognition, more like pain with no address. Vincent's hand closed around her elbow. "That's enough," he said. I grabbed his wrist before I even realized I'd moved. "What did you do?" Security arrived almost instantly, which told me later this was not an accident. Men in black jackets, calm faces, hands out. The whole lobby slowed around us. Parents stared. Children stared harder. Mara, God, even in my mind I couldn't call her anything else, took one step back. "Sir," one guard said, "you need to let go. She's my wife." You could feel the room inhale. Vincent didn't raise his voice. Men like him didn't need volume. "My daughter suffered a traumatic brain injury years ago. She does not know this man." Daughter. Not widow. Not deceased child. Daughter. Something inside me went cold and sharp. "You told me she died." "Caleb," he said quietly, "this is neither the time nor the place for another episode." Episode. The word slapped harder than if he'd hit me. Then June came out of the side hallway, clutching her certificate. "Dad?" She looked at the guards first, then at me, then at Mara. Children know before they know why. June stopped walking. Mara looked at her. June whispered, "Mom?" The sound that came out of Mara then was tiny, barely there, like a piano key touched by accident. Her free hand went to her chest. Vincent's grip tightened on her elbow. "We're leaving." June looked up at me, panicked, betrayed, waiting for me to tell her the world was still shaped the way it had been 10 seconds earlier. I couldn't. Security pulled me back. Mara kept staring at June as Vincent guided her toward the exit. Halfway to the doors, she twisted once, like her body had remembered something her mind hadn't. Then she was gone. June did not cry there. She waited until we got to the parking garage. Then she asked, "Why did she look at me like that?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. "Dad," she said again, but this time smaller. "Why didn't she know me?" There are questions no parent deserves and no child deserves more. I put both hands on the hood of the car because if I touched my daughter too quickly, I was afraid I'd shatter in her arms. "I don't know," I said. That was the first honest thing in hours. June looked down at the certificate still clutched in her hand. "Did you lie to me?" "No. You said she died." "She did." My own voice sounded insane to me. "I saw it happen." "Then who was that?" I had no answer, and a child can hear the shape of hopelessness even when you try to hide it. That night, June didn't touch dinner. At midnight, I found her on the living room floor with all the photo albums open around her like evidence. "She has my nose," June said without looking up. I sat beside her. "She has your hands, too," I said. June wiped her face angrily. "If she was alive, why didn't she come back?" The cruelty of children's questions is that they go directly for the artery. I said the only thing I knew for certain. "She didn't leave you on purpose." "How do you know?" "Because when she heard your voice, her whole body broke." But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, "Because your mother loved you before you had bones." June finally looked at me then, and her face was so young, so wrecked, that I felt a kind of rage I had never known. Not grief. Grief is soft compared to rage. Rage has structure. By morning, I was at the hospital where Mara had been pronounced dead. The records department said her file was sealed. Sealed. I asked by whom. They said they couldn't disclose that. I asked if the dead usually got privacy upgrades. They asked me to lower my voice. So I called Owen Mercer. Owen had been my friend since high school. He was now a detective with enough gray in his beard to look credible on local news. He'd helped me through the custody fight, sat on my porch at 2 in the morning after the funeral and said nothing useful but stayed anyway, which is sometimes the best gift a man can give another man. When I told him Mara was alive, he went quiet for too long. That silence told me more than words would have. "You knew something," I said. "No. You knew enough to make that pause." "Caleb." I slammed my palm against the steering wheel so hard the horn blared. "Did you know?" He exhaled. I knew there were irregularities in the chart. My vision tunneled. What irregularities? An amendment logged 6 minutes after the recorded death. Then the file vanished under a legal seal attached to Hale Medical Council. I couldn't speak. Owen kept talking, like men do when they realize the truth is already making things worse. I pushed as far as I could back then. A nurse told me off the record there had been return of spontaneous circulation. I filed a request. It got buried. Vincent had the board. He had the hospital attorneys. And you were broken, I snapped. Conveniently unbelievable? Caleb. You let me bury an empty future. He didn't defend himself. That almost made me hate him more. I was told she had catastrophic memory damage, he said at last, and that moving her under private neurological care was in her best interest. Who decided that? Silence again. We both knew the answer. Vincent. I hung up. For the next 2 days, I became the kind of man who scares receptionists. Private clinics, old staff directories, retirement records, board minutes. I tore through every locked drawer in the past until I found one thing that bled. A nurse named Teresa Alvarez. She had been on duty the night Mara died. She'd since retired and moved 30 miles north. When she opened her front door, she took one look at me and started crying before I said a word. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I stood on that porch, feeling 7 years pile onto my shoulders all at once. "Tell me." She told me everything. 6 minutes after Mara was pronounced, while Teresa was removing leads, Mara's heart kicked back into rhythm. Panic, crash team, chaos. Vincent arrived before anyone called me back. He already had attorneys moving. Teresa didn't understand how at the time. She does now. Mara survived, but the brain swelling was severe. When she woke weeks later, she knew her first name and almost nothing else. No husband, no baby, no home. Just flashes, sounds, a smell of cinnamon, a green kitchen towel, a lullaby she couldn't place. Vincent told the medical team Caleb was unstable, violent in grief, dangerous for recovery. He said introducing traumatic stimuli too early could destroy what little cognitive stability remained. He transferred Mara to a private neuro rehab center under legal guardianship. Then he changed her world one lie at a time. He told her her husband had drowned in the same week she collapsed. He told her the baby had not survived the pregnancy complications. He told her the gaps in her mind were too dangerous to force open. He told her her name was Anna because hearing Mara triggered seizures in rehab, which might have even been true the first time. Monsters love borrowing a teaspoon of truth. "Why?" I asked Teresa, my throat raw. "Why would he do that?" She looked at me with old, defeated eyes. "Because your wife had started documenting financial theft inside his foundation before she collapsed. She told one of the residents she was afraid of her father, afraid he'd ruin her if she exposed him. Once she lost her memory, he didn't just get his daughter back. He got silence." I actually had to sit down. The porch chair creaked under me. For 7 years, I had imagined cruel possibilities. I had not imagined one this careful. Teresa went inside and came back with a small envelope. "In the rehab center," she said, "patients were sometimes allowed recorded prompts from family to trigger memory recovery. Vincent approved only his own. But one night, Mara asked to make a recording of her own. Said if memory ever returned, she wanted proof of what she'd felt before it vanished again. I copied it. I don't know why. Maybe because I was already ashamed." My hands shook taking it. There was an old flash drive inside. I drove home like I was transporting a live bomb. June was at my sister's. Good. Some truths deserve a smaller room. On my laptop screen, Mara appeared in grainy low light, hospital pale, hair cropped close, eyes frightened and strangely empty. She looked directly into the camera. "If you're seeing this," she said slowly, "it means I forgot again, or they made me doubt what I know." Her voice wavered. She swallowed hard. "My name is Mara Bennett. My husband is Caleb. My daughter is June. She has a strawberry birthmark on her left shoulder blade, and she squeaks before she laughs. If someone tells me they aren't real, that person is lying." I had to pause the video because I couldn't breathe. When I hit play again, she was crying. "My father is trying to keep me from them. I don't remember enough to prove why, but I remember fear. And I remember Caleb's hands. He fixes broken things when he's scared. He pretends to be calm. He is not calm. If I forgot him, that's not his fault. If he found me, she closed her eyes. Tell him I was trying to come back. That sentence broke something that had stayed unbroken even at the funeral. I bent over my kitchen table and wept into both hands, while the video kept playing her face in flickering silence. When June got home, I showed her only the first part. Mara saying her name, Mara saying June's birthmark, Mara saying real. June covered her mouth and cried without sound. Then she said, "We have to bring her home." Simple, clean, child logic. I wished the world deserved it. Instead, 2 hours later, Vincent called. I hadn't spoken to him directly in years. "Return whatever Teresa gave you," he said. No greeting, no denial. Just that deep, controlled voice, older now, but no less poisonous. "You buried my wife alive. She was barely functioning. You would have shattered her. You told her our daughter was dead." A beat. "When memory collapses," he said, "you stabilize around what remains." I laughed. It came out ugly. "That's what you call it? That girl on the stage is not equipped to survive the truth in one blow. That girl on the stage is my wife. She is also a woman who has built a life around the absence of you." The cruelty of that line was that some part of it was true. Vincent sensed it, pressed harder. "If you force this publicly, you will humiliate her, destabilize her, and turn your daughter into a headline. Is that what you want?" I wanted to drive to his house. I wanted to drag him by the collar through every room until he ran out of explanations. Instead, I said, "What are you afraid she'll remember first? Me? June? Or the money?" He hung up. The next day, Caleb Bennett became local entertainment. Somebody leaked security footage from the concert lobby. Probably Vincent's team. Probably to soften me up. The quip hit social media with captions like, "Grieving dad has meltdown at children's event," and "Man harasses donor family during recital." People who had never missed anyone in their lives suddenly became experts in my behavior. Strangers said I needed help. Strangers said women aren't safe around obsessive men who confuse trauma with entitlement. June saw one of the quips at school. A boy in her class asked if her father was crazy. She came home and locked herself in the bathroom for 40 minutes. That was the moment I knew this couldn't stay private. Vincent wasn't protecting Mara. He was managing optics. So we went public first. Owen, to his credit, came back with teeth. Maybe guilt finally matured into courage. Maybe he saw June's face. Maybe both. He reopened the old file. Teresa gave a statement. A former rehab aide admitted Vincent had forbidden mention of Mara's former life. The local paper started sniffing around the Crestwood Foundation's missing funds. Vincent responded the way powerful men always do. He announced a charity gala. Beautiful venue. Donors. Cameras. A statement about lies, grief, and protecting vulnerable women from harassment. And Mara, Anna to the world, would appear at his side. He was going to turn her into evidence. I almost didn't go. Then June walked into the kitchen in the blue dress she had worn at the recital and said, "If she hears me again, maybe something will happen." My daughter was 13, going on heartbreak. "How are you this brave?" I asked. She shrugged, one shoulder lifting exactly like Mara's used to. "I'm not. I'm just mad." So we went. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and expensive forgiveness. Vincent stood at the podium talking about compassion, while 3 reporters waited near the back pretending not to smell blood. Mara stood 10 feet behind him in silver, one hand lightly touching her own throat, as if something inside her was trying to speak first. When Vincent opened the floor for remarks, I didn't ask permission. I walked straight to the stage. The room began to murmur. Vincent saw me and smiled that measured smile of a man used to turning other people into scenes. Then June stepped beside me. That changed the room. Children make liars nervous. I held up the flash drive. "You told the world I was unstable," I said into the microphone. Someone was too startled to stop me from taking. Maybe I was. People usually are when they bury their wife and raise their infant daughter alone. But grief didn't make me imagine this. Vincent moved toward me.
"Security, don't."
Mara's voice cut through the room. Everyone froze. She was staring at June. June took one shaking breath, then another. Then she did the bravest thing I have ever seen. She started humming. Not a song from the concert. A lullaby. Mara's lullaby. The one she used to sing while pacing the hallway at 2 in the morning with June on her shoulder. Not a famous song. Not something you could accidentally share. A half-made little melody with a skipped note in the middle, because Mara could never remember the proper one. Mara went white. Her hand flew to her mouth. Vincent reached for her. "Anna." She flinched from him. The room changed shape. I played the recording. Grainy hospital light filled the giant projector screen. Mara's own face appeared above the donors and the flowers and the polished lies. "My name is Mara Bennett. My husband is Caleb. My daughter is June." No one moved. When Screen Mara said, "If I forgot him, that's not his fault," I heard someone in the front row start crying. Vincent didn't even look at the screen. He looked only at his daughter, calculating, recalculating, watching control leave the room. Mara staggered back one step, then another. Memories do not come back cinematically, not in a shining beam with music underneath. They come like glass in water, fragments, pain, distortion. Later, she told me what hit first. The smell of burned toast from our first apartment. June's infant squeak laugh. My hand covered in plaster dust touching the small of her back in a hardware store aisle. Then the kitchen floor. Falling. Fear. Her father's face above her in rehab saying, "You have to let that old life go or it will kill you." "No," she whispered. Vincent moved toward her. "Mara, listen to me." She slapped him. The sound cracked across the ballroom. Not dramatic, not huge, just clean. 7 years late and perfect. Then she looked at June. Our daughter was crying openly now, shoulders trembling, still humming the broken lullaby under her breath, like she was afraid silence might take her mother away again. Mara took one step down from the stage, then another. She knelt in front of June like approaching something holy and dangerous. "I know your eyes," she said, voice breaking. "I know your laugh." June made the smallest wounded sound I've ever heard and threw her arms around her. That was the scene that broke me. Not the hospital, not the funeral, not the 7 empty birthdays. That. My wife holding our daughter with both hands like she was afraid she'd disappear if she didn't. Vincent tried one last time. "She's confused," he snapped to the room, to the reporters, to the universe. "She needs medical supervision." Mara looked up from June, and for the first time that night, she looked exactly like the woman I married. Furious, clear, done. "No," she said. "What I needed was my life." The story after that moved faster than grief ever had. Investigations, board resignations, sealed files unsealed, foundation theft exposed. Vincent charged with fraud, coercive control, and obstruction connected to medical records. Turns out, once one lie cracks, the rest get jealous. People asked if justice felt good. Honestly, justice felt administrative. The real thing happened quietly. 3 weeks later, in our kitchen, the same kitchen layout, different house, cheaper cabinets, real life, Mara stood in socks that didn't match and stared at June making tea. "She does that little wrist turn," Mara said softly. "Who?" "June. Before she pours. I do that." "You do," I said. Mara leaned against the counter and cried. Not because everything was fixed, because it wasn't. Memory came back in pieces. Some days she remembered whole years in flashes. Some days she remembered nothing new and sat with that loss like a stone in her lap. There were names she still couldn't reach, places she recognized only when she smelled them. 1,000 wounds created by one monstrous choice. But she stayed. Not because destiny is easy, because love, even injured love, can still choose. One night, months later, June fell asleep on the couch with her head in Mara's lap while a terrible movie played unwatched in the background. I came into the room and found Mara brushing hair off our daughter's forehead with that old, absent-minded tenderness. She looked up at me, not like a stranger, not even like a woman trying to recover a photograph, like my wife. Tired, changed, scarred by stolen years. But there. "I'm angry," she whispered. "I know. At him, at myself, at time, at all the birthdays I missed." I sat beside her carefully so I wouldn't wake June. "You don't owe me perfect remembering," I said. Mara's eyes filled. "What do I owe you?" I looked at the two people I'd spent 7 years learning how to love from opposite sides of grief. And I told her the truest thing I knew. Just don't leave by disappearing while you're still in the room. She laughed once through tears. That laugh sounded like survival. Years later, when people ask June what she believes in, she doesn't say miracles. She says return. Because miracles sound like magic. Return sounds like work. And love, the real kind, has always been more work than magic. Still, every now and then, I catch Mara smiling at me across a crowded room, and there's a half second where my chest still remembers the stranger. Then June says something sarcastic, Mara snorts tea through her nose, and the room becomes ours again. Some losses bury you. Some come back and ask whether you still recognize the sound of their footsteps. I did. And this time, when my wife smiled at me, she remembered why. If someone you loved vanished behind a lie, a silence, or a locked door, tell me in the comments, what would you have held on to long enough to find them again?